Leute aus dem Musiker-Board. Wir sind hier bei Universal Audio im Scotts Valley in Kalifornien und sitzen gerade mit Lev Perry, unserem dem eigentlichen Head of Product Management hier bei Universal Audio. Und wir werden jetzt mal ein bisschen ausfragen über das, was Universal Audio so macht und gemacht hat und wohin es denn geht, die Reise. Und yeah, Lev, thanks for having us.
Thank you for being here.
Really cool. We just had the tour, everything. We're in the Universal Audio Studio 610, right?
Correct, yeah.
So, Universal Audio, maybe just like tell our listeners, who are you, what do you do? Cool. I just told them, head of product management, but what's your mission here?
Right on. So yeah, we're here in Scotts Valley, California, Universal Audio headquarters. This is our studio, Studio 610, as you mentioned. And, the particular purpose for this room is all about product development. We do listening for all of the analog, digital, plug-in development that we do here. It's important for us to have an environment that is much like what high-end studios, high-end users would have, so that we know it would work in that environment and all the way down to maybe a bedroom studio or even something on the go. Because Universal Audio, going back to the late 50s, started making high-end equipment, and Bill Putnam Sr. was the inventor of a lot of important gear that's still used in studios today. Things like the 1176, the LA2A, some of these things that are just so iconic. And you mentioned the name of the studio.
Right.
Studio 610 was the name of the classic console that was used to record some of the biggest bands ever. Frank Sinatra, Nat King Cole. Countless records were made on some of the 610 consoles. So that idea of the heritage of the company has carried right through to today. So, Bill Putnam Jr. Restarted the company, a little bit more than 15 years ago, with the idea that we would make the original analog equipment. So, you guys took the tour through manufacturing, where in the building we still make 1176s, LA2As, variants of the 610 in channel strip form. The other side of the business is hybrid analog and digital. So, we've made plugins for about the last 14 years or so, but we've taken the plugins to the next level by actually putting them into audio interface products, and that's the Apollo. And Apollo has really, just exploded all over the world. It's really become a standard for new school professionals to be able to record locally, wherever they are, in the studio, on the go, and it can actually scale up to be in a room like this. So actually behind me we've got multiple Apollos in a rack. They are also connected to the Apollo Twin, all via Thunderbolt. So, if you just have the little Twin, you can plug in and record through our plugins, get the sound of the emulations, which emulates the classic analog equipment. And again, it can scale up however you need, or just be the one thing that you get to make music in your bedroom, like I might do at home.
Right.
That's the sort of the product side of the, what the company is doing, but definitely I think, you've seen, the company's really focused on product development. We're really into multiple disciplines, whether it be hardware, whether it be the plugins, whether it be software development, making our apps work very well, working on Mac and Windows, and, just making it a fluid experience when you take an interface, you marry it up with Logic or Pro Tools or Cubase or Ableton Live, that it just work really well and be something that you couldn't get with, say, another interface, or without an interface, because lots of people might plug their headphones into the Mac or PC and just listen, but we're really all about being able to record and get great sounds on the input, and that's really what Universal Audio is known for.
Right.
The second part is probably about mixing. People love our plugins, and that's really where we take a lot of pride in making sure that when we do a plugin, it sounds exactly like the rack or console counterpart. And so we've got a rack full of gear here of some of the stuff that we've modeled, some stuff that we haven't. And the idea that we take the things that are maybe too expensive for people to afford, or maybe things that people only get to use in high-end studios, and we put that in plug-in format, and then you can use that to mix, or you can use that again to track.
Awesome.
So it's maybe a little bit of a jumbled, high-level example of what we do.
No, that's all right.
But from my perspective, we're trying to make the best analog equipment that we can, the best digital equipment that we can. Really, we're seeing just a big change. Because computers are so prevalent now in music production. It's more rare to find someone who's not using a computer.
Right.
Maybe 10 years ago, it wasn't the case. It was like, oh yeah, I'm still using analog for this or tape for that. And now everything's in the box. And so we just try to make products that bring the old along for the ride, make things that are uncompromised, sound amazing, and still give you the sound and the tone of classic equipment. That's a really important aspect for Universal Audio.
So why don't you tell us about the actual process of designing digital equivalents to the analog versions?
Absolutely. So we employ some of the most important and amazing minds in the field of replication. We use a process called physical modeling, and it's kind of what it sounds like. It's basically the process of taking both a schematic and a circuit board and recreating it inside the computer. Some companies decide to go different routes. They might say do signal modeling, where you sort of run something through a piece of gear and then the result is what they model. But we're actually more interested in if there's a transistor, a transformer, an inductor, a tube, that gets recreated in the software. Right. And so you get a much more accurate representation of what's going on. And if we do it right, you don't have to model what happens when you turn the knobs in this way. It behaves the same way, so it just works. And that's always the test for us. If we can make something in software that has the same components as the actual hardware, they should be the same. And that's we don't ship a product until that's been achieved. So plugin development takes a long time at UA. It usually is 9 months to a year per plugin. That's why we don't come out with a lot of plugins every year. It's 2 to 4 max. Right. But again, we're taking our time because we try and identify what is the best plugin that we could do, and then we take our time to do it right. And often we will run into a roadblock where the current methodologies that we have to emulate something really complicated like tubes or tape or something that is some of the stuff that we're now most known for, we'll have to reinvent a process, some sort of an algorithm that will actually get us even further into the realism of some of these components, because they're nonlinear, they have distortion, they have complex interactions with other, maybe knobs or circuits that are in the design, and those types of things are what we're most proud of, because we actually are, first and foremost an analog company, so we'll take the thing apart and realize, wow, if you pull this thing out or if you turn this thing up, things completely change with just the way that everything flows through the circuit. And so for us, we make sure that we've absolutely nailed the way that the circuit behaves. And even most recently doing something like the Fairchild, one of the most complex things that we've ever done with a dozen tubes and just tons of different complex interactions. This took us a year just for this plugin. And we got a golden unit from Motion Away Studios down in Los Angeles, California, and we spent a lot of time taking it apart. They were kind of nervous, like, what are you going to do? You're going to take apart our $40,000 Fairchild? And it's like, okay, don't worry, we know what we're doing. We're going to be able to put it back together. You'll never know. But that was the process, just to make sure that we got the sound of the Fairchild. And that's par for the course for us. It will take a long time, and it will be accurate. That's sort of the benchmark to be able to ship it to a customer.
Awesome. So, as we know, you're a director of product management. What's your position in all that whole process? Maybe you can elaborate.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I'm really responsible for representing almost every major component. So I represent the customer, making sure that, if customers want us to do a certain thing, if they have requests, if they have, complaints or things that they would like to have fixed on our platform, I'm supposed to take those things in and make sure that we're prioritizing them correctly. We also look for opportunities to, go into new markets or go into new segments. Maybe we've got enough of one type of plugin and we should do another. So I really work, with a team of other product managers to prioritize things and figure out what we should do next. So that's the outside world. On the inside, I work with engineering, I work with marketing and sales to satisfy the company's goals, to make sure that, well, we got to get a product out on time, or, okay, I've got, what the customer wants. Now we've got to actually put that into a spec that an engineer can build. So a lot to do with the actual, design of the product. So I personally, work on hardware and software, but I've also got guys that are just dedicated on plugins, dedicated on interface hardware, analog hardware, any number of software applications. So we're a really diverse team as far as product management is concerned. But
so you're kind of the glue that holds all the compartments together and makes sure they're all rolling together.
We try, and of course, it's fair to say we work with some of the most talented engineers, QA people.
Peter was the name, I think.
Yeah. So Dave, you met Peter. There's so many people upstairs that are involved. It's really not. Product management is really just trying to represent the customer, the market, and bring it all together. That's really our biggest value add. But like I said, I always give most of the credit to our engineers, who are just so amazing to be able to actually take and translate what we bring in from the outside world, and actually come up with some of the stuff and have it sound as good as it does and have it work as well as it does. That's, I think, the magic, because even going back to the original company back in the 50s, I mean, they were dealing with the same problems. It was like, well, technology can only do what it can do, and now we might take it for granted. But back then, it's like, well, they had to take all these transformers and tubes and, keep it all stable, keep it all, not too hot, but, really hot and really, really cooking and still sound great without, cooking itself to death. I always think of the story of the 1176 that Bill Jr. Talks about frequently, which is, the LA2A is this really expensive, really hot, amazing tube amplifier and limiter circuit. Right. Then he went into the 1176 to actually use FETs. It didn't have tubes. That was the more expensive box when it shipped. We think of an LA2A now, it's like that's the most expensive product we make. And it's really expensive to make. It takes a long time. It's point to point. It's hand wired. It's really, really complicated. But the 1176, when it came out, was cutting edge technology. It would be the equivalent of our Thunderbolt interfaces or one of our plugins doing some really complex math and algorithms. Yeah. But that's the lifeblood of UA, has always been to move forward with technology and not be afraid of we might do something new that might completely antiquate something that we have or something else that's out there. And we're really not afraid of that, because we think that technology is what, quite frankly, a lot of our customers get excited by. Just something new, something that is a little bit science fiction, maybe a little bit retro at the same time. We think that's a good combination for product design.
So talking about the actual customer's side of things, how there's nowadays there's mobile recording, and actually you can make real high quality recordings with a quite low budget nowadays.
Totally.
At least. And how there back in the day, or when it all started, there was kind of that musical social stigma to it, that it's no, you can't do anything with digital processing. You need the analog thing. What's your obviously you kind of go with the flow and you do that, but what's your behind that? What's your real opinion of that? Do you really think that's a cool thing, or do you really also think that analog is still the way to go if you can?
Yeah, we're definitely of two minds about the whole thing. Me personally, and I think the company representing them, I think you actually characterize it just right. I mean, when we think about plugin design, for example, to take that one example, we firmly believe that we make the best plugins. We know we've got competition. We know that there's tons of free stuff that comes in every single DAW. But what we're trying to do has always been slightly different from what others are trying to do. And I definitely think it's fair to say it's the stuff that you would get in your DAW is definitely enough to get started, even to make something that sounds high quality. And that's why we've always chosen let's go for the things that are maybe 5 to 10% more interesting, harder than what maybe comes for free. And maybe not everybody can hear that, little nuance or that little bit of subtle interaction. But, that's what we think is important. We think it's important to always go for that higher quality bar. Instead of oh, we don't have a thing that does this. It's well, I can always bring those things to the company. But it's yeah, but we're really focused on getting the next killer spring reverb out or something like that. We recently did the AKG BX20, and that was the whole thing. It was we don't have a BX20 on the platform, and we could do a more new school or, lesser DSP reverb. But we decided, what? We walk into any studio and they've got a BX20. We just got to have that on the platform. Right. And so we feel we're going to design something that's just a little bit higher quality, maybe takes up more CPU, but is totally worth it. Yeah. Because what you're going to get out of it is a cut above. So that's one example.
All right, so last question.
Yes, sir.
You were already going towards the point that the general consensus here is that you firmly believe that you're doing all the best digital plugins on the market. But now for you as a musician and technician that is also a potential customer.
Totally.
In 2 or 3 sentences, why is UA the way to go regarding digital plugins?
Yeah, it's a great question. For us, it's all about doing things that allow you to grow. So I think definitely there's tons of options that are way cheaper than Universal Audio. So the way we see it go generally is people start out maybe with something that's more affordable, but when they decide, I need better preamps, I need better converters, and then especially when they see what our Unison technology can do, that's usually when they decide, this is a step up where you're going to get higher quality everything. So even something like the Apollo Twin gives you a taste of what's in our higher end rack mount gear. And then if you decide later, I'd like to get into, like the rack mount gear, maybe you need more inputs and outputs, maybe you need more mic preamps, things like this. The cool thing is that the Apollo can actually integrate with Thunderbolt. So you take your Mac, you take your Apollo Twin, maybe you started with, you Thunderbolt it to a rack mount device, and you can grow. And all of our plugins run on any of the boxes. So just in terms of having a scalable system, I really feel like we're doing something that's different from what maybe other companies are doing. And definitely with the plugins, the fact that our plugins run everywhere is a really unique thing to our company. So.
All right. Awesome. Well, thanks for having us. It was a pleasure. Really.
Likewise. Thank you for
really
coming.
Cool.
Awesome.
Really cool Studio. Yeah. Checkt mal UA aus und guckt euch die Studios an hier. Ist ein Trip wert. Martin zeigt euch das mal. Und danke fürs Zuschauen. That's cool. Sounds good.